Educated is a memoir by Tara Westover. It tells the story of her experiences growing up in and subsequently leaving a radical survivalist Mormon home. Abused by a loved and trusted older brother, Westover struggles for years to escape the cycles of abuse and finally finds her escape through her education. It's a story of struggles and triumphs and the conflict in the mind of a woman torn between family loyalty and her survival instincts. Published in 2018, Educated debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list and received numerous awards and accolades. With glowing recommendations from people like Bill Gates, Oprah, and Barack and Michelle Obama, Educated has met with wild success. A beautifully crafted book, it's a story of awakening, self-discovery, and healing. Standing on an abandoned railway car, Tara Westover turns her face to the wind. It swirls over the valley below her as she surveys her family's rural farm, tucked into the mountains of Idaho. Tara is only 7, but she understands that her family is different from other families. The Westover children do not go to school, working instead in their father's junkyard. They do not have birth certificates, and they have never seen a doctor or nurse. Tara is the youngest of the family, and knows no other life. Naively, she accepts her bizarre, isolated childhood. She grew up preparing for the days of abomination, she explains, watching for the sun to darken, for the moon to drip as if with blood. When the world of men failed, my family would continue on, unaffected. Tara is deeply connected to the land around her, especially to Buck's Peak, the mountain rising over the valley in which her home is situated. The mountain's face gives the impression of a woman's body, and Tara describes this Indian princess as almost a human thing. To Tara, the mountain is a symbol of her home, and for many years, it will be a landmark to guide her back, time and time again. Tara's father, who is identified by the pseudonym Gene Westover, tells the children the story of the Ruby Ridge standoff, and it leaves a deep and lasting impression on Tara. In Gene's version, the feds surrounded a nearby family's home and killed them off one by one, simply because Randy and Vicky Weaver wouldn't let the government brainwash their kids in them public schools. They'll be coming for us next, Gene tells his family. We must be ready. The Westover children have been taught to fear and hate the feds, and this story takes such vivid root in young Tara's imagination that she creates her own cinematic version in which the Weaver family is replaced with her own. It becomes her earliest memory, haunting her for years. Her family stockpiles food to prepare for the inevitable standoff with the government. Her father preaches to his cousin, a dairy farmer, about the sinfulness of milk, hoards military surplus rifles, and debates with his mother the moral danger of public schools. Gene's family has been living at the base of Buck's Peak for half a century, and his junkyard, next to his mother's manicured lawn, is a constant source of conflict between the two. Gene's mother is referred to as Grandma Down the Hill to distinguish her from the children's other grandmother, Grandma Over in Town, who lives, as her name suggests, in the only town in the county. Grandma Down the Hill is a force of nature, impatient, aggressive, self-possessed. On principle, she disagrees with almost everything her son believes. When Grandma and her husband are going to Arizona for the winter, she asks Tara to go with her, unbeknownst to the family, of course. Her grandmother offers to put her in school, and Tara agrees. Yet, when it comes time to leave, Tara stays with her family. It's not as much a conscious choice as a mechanical acceptance of her way of life. Gene Westover believes that a woman's place is in the home. He opposes women working outside that sphere, yet he makes an exception when he wants Tara's mother, Faye, to become a midwife. It furthers his plan to make his family completely self-sufficient and live off the grid. With Tara's mother working as a midwife, the family won't have to rely on hospitals for the births of their grandchildren. Faye does not want to be a midwife. She's fragile and vulnerable, and witnessing traumatic births takes its toll on her. Facing pressure from her husband, however, and the fact that they need the extra money, she becomes a midwife's assistant. When Judy, the midwife for whom she works, takes a job in another state, Faye reluctantly takes over her clients. Midwifing is not an accepted practice in Idaho, and if a birth goes wrong, the midwife can be held responsible. Tara is defensive of her mother and believes in her fiercely, and eventually, Faye gains confidence and experience. As a midwife, she must be constantly on call, and for the first time in years, the family gets a telephone. Tara sees allowing a telephone as a signal of acceptance from her father. If he is going to do battle with the government, then he has to take some calculated risks. When Tara's older brother, Luke, needs a birth certificate to enroll in driver's ed, her mother decides to get birth certificates for all the younger children who don't have one. Thus begins a struggle to establish the legal identity of her children. In Tara's case, no one is sure what day she was born, and no medical, school, or other records exist that give a definitive answer. Her lack of legal documentation doesn't bother Tara. In fact, when she is finally issued a delayed birth certificate, her first legal proof of personhood, she feels oddly dispossessed. Tara explores her parents' background. Faye Westover was raised in respectability. Her mother, LaRue, grew up with an alcoholic father, and in age-old tradition, the sins of the father were visited on the children. LaRue wanted the opposite for her children, and young Faye was forced to conform to a white picket fence image that she didn't want. Desperately trying to please those around her, and surrounded by the judgments and whispers of a small town, Faye felt trapped. When she met Gene, a seemingly free and independent boy from the mountain, she quickly fell for him. Growing up on a mountain farm, Gene came from a very different background than Faye. His mother worked in town, and Gene was often left alone with his father, who had a quick temper and could be violent. Tara believes that Gene's fierce opposition to women working outside the home may have stemmed from simply wishing that his mother had been at home rather than at work, so that she could have shielded him from his father's anger. Despite opposition from her family, Faye and Gene got married. Their life begins in a seemingly normal way, and Tara wonders when the happy young groom changed into the paranoid, troubled man she knows as her father. The reader gets the sense that earlier in his life, Gene Westover was a different man. Tara's older brothers can recall the years that she is too young to remember. Around the age of 30, Gene pulled his oldest sons, Tony, Sean, and Tyler, out of school, and after that, chose not to file birth certificates for his younger children, Luke, Audrey, Richard, and Tara. In the years that followed, Gene got rid of the family's telephone and decided not to renew his driver's license. He stopped registering and insuring the family car and began to hoard food. Tara briefly questions if her father's mood swings and schizophrenia might have been symptoms of bipolar disorder. She would never hear the term mental disorder, however, until she was an adult in a university classroom. When Tara's father becomes ill, her mother takes the family to stay with Gene's parents in Arizona for the summer. In the desert heat, Gene slowly recovers and, true to form, spends his convalescence in lengthy rants that no one listens to, condemning his mother, Grandma over the hill, for seeing a doctor. When he decides it's time to leave, he bizarrely forces his family to make the 12-hour drive home in a single night, leaving after dinner. 20 minutes from their farm, Tyler falls asleep at the wheel and crashes the family car. Several family members are injured, especially his mother, who suffers a serious head injury. Refusing to go to a doctor, Gene takes her home, and she begins a months-long recovery that leaves her with memory loss and likely brain damage. Her specific injuries are unknown because she was never diagnosed. Tyler blames himself for the accident and is racked with guilt at every repercussion that stems from it. When he introduces his family to the idea, his father is at first scornful, but when he sees that Tyler is determined, he eventually accepts his son's decision. Tyler is the one who first introduces Tara to music, and she develops an interest that will eventually be the first step in her rejection of her father's fundamentalist lifestyle. Tyler is different than the rest of his family, and even as a child, Tara senses this. He teaches himself algebra, listens to classical music, and wants more from life than the honest dirt his junkyard-dealing father has taught his children is enough. Tara sees her father as the instigator of their extremist survivalist lifestyle and blames him more than her mother, who is sometimes portrayed as a brainwashed accomplice and sometimes as a victim. When Tyler leaves for college, he is written out of the family, at least temporarily. Tara doesn't see him again for 5 years. When Audrey Westover turns 15, she begins to work in town, becoming more independent and spending little time at home. With Tyler gone to college, the junkyard crew is short-handed, So Tara begins to work alongside her brothers, Luke and Richard. The oldest boys, Tony and Sean, are grown and working as truckers. Unvaccinated and without a hard hat or protection of any kind, young Tara works in a world of rusty iron, sharp edges, and flying steel. Eventually, and predictably, she suffers an injury that leaves her with a deep gash in her leg. During this period, her mother is still recovering from the car accident, dealing with confusion and memory loss from her head injury. She can no longer work as a midwife and begins to mix essential oils to self-medicate. People begin to pay her for spiritual healing and energy work. When any of the family is injured, however seriously, he or she is treated with herbs and flowers. One day, when 17-year-old Luke is working with his father in the junkyard and uses a cutting torch to remove fuel tanks from wrecked vehicles, the torch ignites gasoline on his jeans, setting his leg on fire. Though her siblings' accounts differ somewhat from hers, in Tara's memory, Luke somehow gets himself down the mountain and appears at the house alone. Their mother is not at home, and 11-year-old Tara does her best to help her brother. She fills a garbage bag with water and ice and submerges the charred leg in it until her mother arrives. Without pain medication, Luke suffers through his mother cutting away the dead flesh from his leg and treating it with homemade salve. Slowly, Luke recovers. The story becomes a family conversation piece with jokes centered around the twine that Luke wore in place of a belt, which prevented him from getting out of his gasoline-soaked jeans when the torch ignited them. Wanting to get away from the dangerous environment of the junkyard, Tara starts babysitting children in town. The sister of one of her clients, Caroline, teaches a dance class and Tara decides to join. She isn't allowed to wear the tights and leotards the other girls wear because they're not modest. But despite the awkwardness, she feels a sense of belonging. For the dance class's recital, the teacher selects sweatshirts as costumes so that Tara can perform with the rest of the girls. Jean comes to the dance recital, and Tara is so uncomfortable that she doesn't perform the dance properly, refusing to lift her arms or cartwheel, afraid that the sweatshirt will expose her legs. Jean is furious. On the way home, he shouts at Tara and her mother, calling the recital and the costumes sinful and lewd. The class claimed to teach dance, he said, but instead it taught immodesty and promiscuity. Faye calms her husband and agrees with him. Later that night, she comes into Tara's room. "I should have known better," she says. "I should have seen that class for what it was." Faye searches for something else for her daughter, something to replace the dance class that Jean won't allow. She finds a voice teacher and Tara sings a hymn for the congregation at church. She's flooded with compliments on her beautiful voice, and at last, Jean is proud. As Tara rehearses to sing the lead in a play in town, her family is preparing for the end of the world. Jean calls it Y2K. It will come on January 1st, he tells Tara. At midnight, the world will fail and the second coming of Christ will be ushered in. 4 nights a week, Tara drives to town to rehearse the play Annie. At home, she packs and stores food for the end times. At rehearsals, she sees other children who go to school and have friends. She is befriended by a boy named Charles. On the night of December 31st, Tara waits for the world to end, but midnight comes and goes, and the earth is still the same. Jean is crushed. Seeing his disappointment, Tara questions how God could deny him this when he believed and faithfully prepared for the second coming. She compares him to a Noah with an ark, but without a flood. After the shattering disappointment of Y2K, or rather the absence of it, Jean is broken and slips into depression. Faye decides that another trip to Arizona will cure him. This trip is similar to the first one, with Jean reviving in the warm sun and railing at his mother about the evils of doctors. Eerily, history repeats itself when one evening, with a snowstorm gathering, Jean tells the family to gather their stuff because he has decided they're going home. This time, Richard is driving, and when he can no longer see the road because of the snow, he pulls over. Jean takes the wheel and drives quickly, despite the treacherous road conditions. When Faye suggests he should go slower, he grins. "I'm not driving faster than our angels can fly," he tells her. Moments later, the van leaves the road and crashes in a field. After the accident, Tara suffers paralysis in her neck, which of course goes untreated. She can't turn her head. She is bedridden for a month after the crash. During this time, her brother Sean, who has been gone so long that he's almost a stranger, comes home. He's there only temporarily to help his dad. Tara is standing in the kitchen when Sean asks about her injury. He thinks she needs to see a chiropractor, but Tara responds that Mom will fix it. Suddenly, Sean comes up behind her and violently jerks her head sideways. She's dizzy and nauseous from the pain, but she can finally turn her head. When you can stand, Sean tells her, I'll do the other side. Sean and Tara bond quickly. He was a troublemaker growing up, she knew, but not really bad, just wild. He breaks in a horse for Tara, and they ride on the mountain together. Tara sees Sean as a protector, someone who watches out for her rather than someone who deliberately puts her in harm's way like her father does. Tara looks up to Sean and trusts him. He drives her to her rehearsals, and there Tara sees hints of his violent nature. He watches the younger boys and begins to goad them. It begins with small things, like jolting a glass out of someone's hand or knocking off their hat. He shows no aggression with Tara, though, and they grow closer. When Sean fills in for his older brother for a few weeks trucking long haul, he takes Tara with him. They fill up empty hours of driving by playing word games, and when waiting for their truck to be unloaded, Sean teaches Tara self-defense, demonstrating pressure points and how to incapacitate an attacker. At Tara's rehearsals, a girl named Sadie takes an interest in Sean. He's scornful and finds her attention annoying, but she starts coming by the junkyard to see him, bringing snacks and trying to talk to him. At the next rehearsal, Sean sees Sadie talking to Tara's friend Charles, and he won't speak to her. Desperate to atone, Sadie will do anything Sean tells her to do. When he asks for a Snickers bar, she runs across the street to buy one. When she brings it to him, he asks why she got him a Snickers and not the Milky Way he asked for. Sadie goes back to the store for a Milky Way. When she returns, Sean asks for his Snickers and berates Sadie for getting it wrong again. Sadie starts coming over every day after school. Sean continues to manipulate her, sending her back to the kitchen over and over again for a different drink, or into town for something they don't have, only to reject what he asked for when she returns. He becomes jealous and stalks her at school. One night, bringing Sean a glass of water, Tara dumps it over his head, and he responds with the violence that will define their relationship for years. He drags Tara by the hair to the bathroom and shoves her head into the toilet bowl. Then, using the martial arts he taught her on the trucking trip, he bends her wrist until he almost breaks it, forcing her to apologize. After the incident, Tara stares into the bathroom mirror with tears running down her face and makes the decision that she won't be weak. She won't let him affect her. She wills herself to be unbreakable, and this will define her attitude through the coming years and countless episodes of abuse. Tara is 15 and beginning to grow into a woman. Her body is changing in ways that she isn't prepared for, and she's awkward and uncomfortable. She doesn't want to be like the women she hears her father criticize, the immodest women, the ones who wear tight clothing or whose hemlines stop above their knee. When Sean sees her putting on makeup, he calls her a whore. Sean dumps Sadie, but when he hears that she went out with Charles, he drives around town for hours with a gun on the seat beside him, looking for Charles's Jeep. One morning, Tara wakes up to Sean's hands around her neck, choking her and dragging her from her bedroom by her hair. Faye is trying to stop him, but Sean is like a madman, screaming at Tara that she is a slut and a whore. I see you for what you are, he tells her. I see you prance around with Charles like a prostitute. Faye tries to defend her daughter, but she is powerless against her 24-year-old son. Sean grabs Tara's wrist, bending her backward and refusing to let go until she admits that she is a whore. Close to passing out from the pain, Tara hears a voice demanding to know what's going on. It's Tyler, home for a visit. Tyler protects her from Sean and encourages her to leave the dangerous environment of her house and go to college. He explains that Brigham Young University accepts homeschoolers as long as she can pass the ACT. There's a world out there, Tara, and it will look a lot different once Dad is no longer whispering his view of it in your ear. That night, Sean comes to Tara with a peace offering, a string of pearls. He half apologizes to her, trying to justify his actions. He explains that he doesn't want to see her act like other girls, superficial and manipulative, using her looks to get what she wants. Tara is conflicted about her changing body, and she wants to believe her brother. He knows the world and worldly women. She asks him to keep her from becoming one. Tara is afraid of her brother and hates him, but she keeps her feelings to herself, knowing that he loathes himself far more than she ever could. When Tyler convinces Tara to study for the ACT, she drives 80 miles round trip to buy a textbook and starts teaching herself algebra. When she can't understand trigonometry, she meets Tyler at their aunt's house and he tutors her. While there, Tara gets a phone call from her mother. Sean, working as Jean's foreman on a construction site, has fallen and hit his head. Someone called 911 and Sean is in the hospital. The doctors aren't sure if he'll live. He's delirious, but he's asking for Tara. Sean survives, and during his recovery, Tara stays home to care for him. Watching her brother bandaged and helpless, her bitterness towards him lessens. As Sean becomes physically stronger, though, his violence and volatility increase. Tara blames it on the blow to his head. Mentally, she rewrites history and erases the memory of Sean's abuse before his accident. His rage, she convinces herself, stems entirely from the head injury. This violent person isn't who Sean really is. She writes in her journal that she wishes she had her best friend back. Before his injury, I never got hurt at all. While she studies to prepare for college, Tara briefly wonders what it would be like to shake off her father's authority and make her own way. She realizes that the moment she takes that step, she loses him. If they are of two minds, she decides, no world can exist that will tolerate them together. When Jean tells her that college is whoring after man's knowledge, she tells her mother that she isn't going to BYU. In a stunning moment, Faith finally stands up for her daughter. Don't you say that, she tells her. Go. Don't let anything stop you from going. Tara takes her ACT and scores a 22, which is higher than she expected. Encouraged, she studies to take the test again. Needing money, Tara goes back to working at the junkyard. When her father shows up with a ridiculously dangerous piece of equipment to cut iron and demands that she run it, Sean is furious with Jean for forcing his daughter to take such a risk. Jean gives her an ultimatum. Either Tara will run the machine or she won't live in his house. If she's doing it, then I'm doing it with her, Sean responds. Jean is exasperated because Sean is costing him money by savaging iron rather than doing his work as a foreman, but Sean won't leave Tara to do the dangerous work alone. Even though he's still weak from his fall, they work together for a month until the job is finished. The old Sean makes an appearance, the one who played word games with Tara on long trucking hauls and took her riding on Boggs Peak. He stands up to Jean, unaffected by his father's shouting and threats. One night, Tara is studying at Grandma over in Towns, and Sean comes over to watch a movie with her. They eat brownies and he asks about her studies. Sean leaves his grandmother's house on his motorcycle a few minutes before Tara. On the ride home, Tara passes several cars that have pulled over. She sees her brother's hat in the middle of the road and stops. Sean is lying face down in a ditch, and the bystanders are afraid to move him. Blood is pouring from a hole in his forehead. When Tara calls her father, he calmly tells her to bring Sean home. She protests. She can see his brain through the hole in his head. But her father insists on her bringing Sean home. Not understanding how or why she disobeys her father's direct order, she doesn't take Sean home, but to a hospital. Her brother recovers. This incident opens Tara's eyes to the fact that, like it or not, she is different from her father and not who he expected her to be. After that night, there is no longer a question of whether she will stay home or leave. She feels as if she's living in the future and is already gone. Tara retakes her ACT and gets a score of 28. She applies and is accepted into Brigham Young University. When her father hears this, he's grudgingly accepting. He argues that it proves one thing at least, namely that their homeschool is as good as any public education. Her mother drives Tara to Utah to find an apartment, and Tara waits for the start of the semester, dreading the void of unknowns that are waiting for her. When Tara begins classes at BYU, she feels lost and out of place. Accustomed to the silence of the mountain, the background noise of the city feels shattering. She finds it difficult to sleep. To Tara's horror, she finds that her Mormon roommates think nothing of violating what she's been taught are the Lord's commandments. They wear short skirts and tank tops, grocery shop on Sundays, and drink Diet Coke. Surrounded by so much unfamiliarity, her father's beliefs feel like a refuge, and she holds on to them tighter than ever. Her professors reference writers and events she's never heard of, like the writings of Cicero and Hume and the Scottish Enlightenment. When she raises her hand in class to ask what the Holocaust was, her professor and classmates think she's mocking it. Tara is humiliated and doesn't speak up in class for the rest of the semester. Tara continues to struggle with her classes, feeling awkward and misplaced, but she wants to stay. She calls home, and her father answers the phone. She tells him about her struggles with her studies and how her grades aren't good enough for a scholarship. Her father tells her that it's okay and that they'll figure it out. "Maybe I can help with the money. Just be happy, okay?" he tells his daughter. Tara knows the mood won't last, but it's a moment of tenderness, and she cherishes it. The only test Tara has ever taken is the ACT, and she doesn't even know how to read a textbook. Her roommates can't understand her ignorance, and they mock and ostracize her, but she works hard and learns quickly. By the end of the semester, she's getting A's. When the semester ends, Tara goes back to Buck's Peak. Her father wants her to work in the junkyard, but instead she takes a job at the local grocery store, determined not to work for her father again. When her mother hears this, she tells Tara that if she doesn't work in the junkyard, she can't live at home. Needing money and not knowing where else to turn, Tara gives in. Her memories of the university fade quickly among the scrap metal and forklifts. Her old life is back, full force. The only difference is Sean. To Tara, he seems changed. He no longer displays a bad temper, and instead of being violent, he's gentle and kind. He's studying for his GED and plans to study law. At a play in town, Tara reconnects with Charles. They go to parks and burger joints, and for the first time in her life, Tara buys attractive, well-fitting clothes and is amazed at how different she looks. When she finds out that her grades got her a scholarship for half her tuition, she finds herself telling Charles her fears and insecurities, how she feels she doesn't even belong in college. Charles questions why her parents never put her in school, and Tara instinctively defends her father. Even as she does it, the words sound forced. She realizes she doesn't believe them herself and feels guilty for her inability to make her father's words her own. When Charles tries to hold her hand one night, Tara flinches away from him. She wants to open up, but the years of abuse stand between her and Charles. She can't move past the scars they've left. Seeing the void between her world and Charles's, Tara tries to keep them separate. She's humiliated when he visits her house. Her father feels that she's acting as if she feels superior to him, and he resents it. He forces her to do menial, unnecessary work in the junkyard, and once again, Sean begins to torment her. He tries to humiliate her in front of Charles, calling her Wilbur, a character from the book Charlotte's Web, because she eats so much, he says. Charles never reacts, and Tara tries to treat it like a joke, laughing off her brother's taunts. When Sean begins to use racial slurs to address her, Tara remembers the stories she learned about at university, stories about slavery, Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. "Don't call me that," she tells Sean. "You don't know what it means." For the first time, she realizes that her worldview has shifted from that of her father and brothers. She's beginning to understand the debased, dehumanizing nature of what she's been taught. Before she goes back to BYU, Tara spends her last day in Idaho with Charles. She's sick, and Charles urges her to take an aspirin for the pain. It's the first time she's taken a pill. At school, she has new roommates, and one of them, Robin, is especially kind to her. Tara is becoming accustomed to a different way of life. Seeing her roommate in shorts no longer shocks her, and she learns how to keep her apartment clean and orderly, something that has never been prioritized in the Westover home. She fails her midterm for an algebra class and studies harder than ever. Needing rent money, she takes a job as a janitor, and between the job and studying for her algebra class, she barely sleeps. This leads to painful stomach ulcers, which only get worse when she won't go to the doctor. Encouraged by Charles, she meets with her algebra professor and tells him she's struggling with the class. He suggests a compromise. If anyone in the class can get a perfect 100 on the final, the person will get an A regardless of how he or she performed on the midterm. Tara jumps at the opportunity and calls Charles. She's coming home for Thanksgiving, she tells him, and she needs an algebra tutor. Charles comes to the Westover farm for Thanksgiving. Tara can sense that Sean is in a mood, and it escalates when Charles arrives for dinner. Tara tries to laugh off everything that Sean does, trying to hide the seriousness of the situation from Charles. When Sean jabs Tara in the ribs, causing her to drop and shatter a plate, she snaps at him, and Sean reacts instantly and brutally. He pins her to the floor and demands that she apologize for breaking the plate. She does, trying to pacify him, but it only makes him angrier. He yanks his sister up by the hair and drags her down the hall to the bathroom. Charles is in shock and has no time to react, and Tara only wants to find a way to make this seem like a joke so that she can keep her family's sordid secrets from becoming known. Sean is screaming at her, forcing her head into the toilet. All Tara can hear is Charles's footsteps, and she goes berserk and manages to free herself. Sean again jerks her backward by the hair. It is so violent that they both fall into the bathtub. When Charles appears, pale and horrified, Tara tries to dismiss the incident, joking through tears about Sean's playfulness. Her big toe is broken, but she won't let Charles help her as she hobbles away. That day changes Charles and Tara's relationship irrevocably. He knows that she is not strong, that her stoic, unaffected persona is just a facade. Tara can't live with her secret being known. She vents all her anger and fear to Charles, who, confused and deeply shaken from witnessing Sean's abuse, only tries to help her. But it's all too much, and their relationship is doomed. In fits of rage, Tara repeatedly screams at Charles that she doesn't want to see him again. One day they meet for the last time, in a field off the highway. Charles tells Tara that he can't save her. It is something only she can do. Tara has no idea what he means. Tara gets the perfect 100 on her algebra final, and she sees it as proof that she is untouchable. Nothing can hurt her. Back home for Christmas, she experiences Sean's abuse once again, this time when she sees Charles's Jeep outside of a store and refuses to go in. Sean drags her from the car and along the asphalt, punching her, disarranging her clothes, and humiliating her. When he's finished, she has a sprained ankle and a broken wrist. That night, he comes to apologize. He tells her he didn't mean to hurt her. The next time they are having fun and he's getting too rough, he says, she should tell him to stop. When he leaves, Tara writes in her journal, "Was it really fun and games? Could he not tell he was hurting me? I don't know. I just don't know." But the memory of the moments in the parking lot comes back, and in a brief moment of clarity, she finally writes as a victim rather than the defendant of her abuser. "If I was larger, at that moment I would have torn him apart." Later, Sean apologizes yet again, and Tara returns to her journal. This time, she defends Sean's actions and dismisses her earlier entry. Yet, looking back as an adult, Tara sees the flicker of uncertainty as a defining moment of strength. In admitting doubt, she was finally beginning to recognize the power of her own voice, the power of admitting uncertainty and believing in oneself despite it. "My life was narrated for me by others," she writes. "Their voices were forceful, emphatic, absolute. It had never occurred to me that my voice might be as strong as theirs." Sean's favorite term for her has taken root in Tara's mind and flourished there until she believes it defines her. She believes she is a whore. When men approach her, she feels immoral and promiscuous. She recalls how Sean used to tell her she behaved like a prostitute, and how she didn't understand the term, but nonetheless blamed herself. Confused and ashamed, 15-year-old Tara wondered if she could be pregnant. She had never kissed a boy. She is ashamed of what she does not even understand. "It's not that I had done something wrong, so much as that I existed in the wrong way. There was something impure in the fact of my being." Tara confides in her bishop, and when she prepares to go home for the summer, he tries to stop her. He offers to pay her rent, but Tara is determined to be independent. She goes home. Sean has a new girlfriend, Emily, who is 10 years younger than him. Partly because of this, Tara has a respite from his cruelty. During the fall semester, she struggles to pay her bills and suffers from a fractured tooth. Although she's stubbornly opposed to it at first, Tara's bishop finally convinces her to apply for financial aid. She gets her grant and is able to pay her bills, buy textbooks, and get medical attention. She begins to feel herself disassociating from her family. A stranger in their lives, she no longer belongs the way she once did. Finally able to focus on her studies without the dread of overdue bills and a pounding toothache, Tara begins to do well in her classes. She understands the lectures and studies with laser focus. It's at this point that she learns about bipolar disorder. As she learns about the disorder symptoms, she becomes certain that they are synonymous with her father's personality. She reads about the standoff at Ruby Ridge, and reaching for an explanation as to why Gene lied to his family about what happened, she connects it with the symptoms of mental illness, paranoia and mania, delusions of grandeur and persecution. Tara becomes obsessed with bipolar disorder, writing papers on it and using her father as a model. When she visits Buck's Peak a week later, she and her father get into an argument. Her anger boils over, and for the first time in her life, she shouts at him, wondering why he lied to his family about Ruby Ridge and caused his small children to live in constant fear. Why are you like this? Why did you terrify us like that? Why did you fight so hard against made-up monsters, but do nothing about the monsters in your own house? Drained, she flees from her home and goes back to school. She gets a new apartment where no one knows her. She meets a new boyfriend, Nick. She alienates everyone and everything connected to her old life. She wants a proverbial clean slate. She wants to be normal. One morning, Tara's sister Audrey calls. She tells Tara that her dad has had an accident and is dying. Tara's father has been horribly burned. Alone on the mountain, Gene used a cutting torch to remove a fuel tank without first draining the fuel. His body was pressed against the frame when it exploded. The lower half of his face is melted like candle wax. The skin is scorched from his hands and chest. Somehow he manages to drag himself to the back door of the farmhouse, and when Tara's cousin Kylie, working for Faye that day, opens the door, all she can think is that he has no skin. Unable to swallow, through lips that no longer exist, Gene manages to tell his wife that he'd rather die than see a doctor. For days he exists between life and death, his only treatments being his wife's herbal mixtures and homemade salves. Faye's business selling essential oils grinds to a halt as she cares for her husband. Through it all, Gene refuses pain medication. It's the Lord's pain, he says, and he'll feel every part of it. As Gene slowly recovers, his family wonders what will be left of the once proud, assertive man that he was. His throat was badly burned in the explosion, and since speaking is painful for him, he is finally forced to listen. Tara tells him about her life at school, and he listens, interested. For his daughter, it feels like an awakening. Sean and Emily announce their engagement. Tara feels burdened to warn Emily of Sean and his violent, manipulative abuse, but she struggles to express what she has only just begun to understand herself. Emily is convinced that Sean is a spiritual man, whose gifts prompted the devil to tempt him more than others. Sean told Emily that he helped Tara and Sadie to resist temptation. Tara cannot understand the power her brother has over Emily, and yet she isn't completely free from his power either. At Sean and Emily's wedding, Tara feels helpless. She feels as if she has failed, though she's not sure what she was meant to do. She returns to BYU, broken and empty. Her old life still has a hold on her, and she can't shake it off. Her boyfriend Nick isn't a part of the old life, only the new one. But because the old and the new cannot coexist, Tara breaks up with him. Tara originally enrolled at BYU to study music, but by her junior year, she's taking history, geography, and politics instead. Her fascination with these topics raises questions in her mind. Her love of music corresponded to her idea of the role of a woman, but her new interests do not. Confused and conflicted, she decides there must be something wrong with her. When she asks one of her professors, Dr. Carey, about it, he doesn't debate her moral conflicts as she expected. Instead, he suggests that she apply to a highly competitive study abroad program in Cambridge. He encourages her to find out what she is capable of, and then decide who she is. Tara's Cambridge application is rejected, but Dr. Kelly says she can accompany him to Cambridge when he goes to teach there, because the university allows him to help one student. He tells Tara she can have the spot if she wants it. Emily is pregnant. The baby is born at 26 weeks gestation, weighing 1 pound, 4 ounces. Emily delivers Peter at home, but he is rushed to the hospital. It takes months and many surgeries before Peter can go home. He is frail, and the doctors warn that his lungs may never fully develop. If she was out of place at BYU, Tara is doubly so at Cambridge. The students are assigned a supervisor to help students with their research. Tara's supervisor is Professor Jonathan Steinberg, who is well known for his writings on the Holocaust. Tara feels lost, groping for answers in a world in which she feels there are no absolutes. For 2 months, she reads with Professor Steinberg, and under his guidance, she dissects and perfects her writing. When she submits an essay to him, he says it's one of the best he's ever read. Used and hardened to criticism, when confronted with praise, Tara shrinks from it. She recalls that she could tolerate any form of cruelty better than kindness. Praise felt like a poison to her. At their next meeting, Professor Steinberg asks Tara where she plans to attend graduate school. He suggests Harvard and Cambridge and says that wherever she applies, he'll ensure that she's accepted. Tara tries to picture herself as a student at Cambridge, but the image is overwhelmed by another. She remembers how Sean pinned her arm behind her back and forced her head into a toilet. She feels as if she has to choose between scholar and whore. They cannot exist side by side. She feels as if she belongs in a junkyard, not a prestigious university. She decides that she can fake it at BYU, but not at Cambridge, where she feels too different, too scarred. Back at BYU, Tara finds it easy to forget about her time spent in Cambridge, but Professor Steinberg sends her an application for a Gates scholarship to Cambridge, which will provide full funding for tuition, room, and board. Tara is sure such an offer is far out of reach, but Professor Steinberg insists that she apply, and so she does. She takes yet another step away from her upbringing when one day she and a friend are discussing the Mormon practice of polygamy, which the Mormon Church had never officially recanted. Tara realizes she will never be one of several wives, even if it was a commandment from God. The realization alarms her, and she attributes it to lack of faith. Her parents come to visit, and against the backdrop of the university campus, Jean's encompassing personality is more jarring than ever. Over dinner, in a restaurant near his daughter's apartment, he rants long and loud about how wealthy Jews manufacture the Holocaust and the imminent ending of the world. When her parents leave, Tara takes out her journals. "It's astonishing that I used to believe all this without the slightest suspicion," she writes. She remembers something Tyler's wife, Stephanie, had told her a few days earlier. It had taken Stephanie years to convince Tyler to immunize their children. Part of him still clung to the belief that vaccinations were a conspiracy by the medical establishment. In her journal, Tara sneers at her brother. She wonders how he, as a scientist, can be so blinded, but her scorn is quickly undermined. "Perhaps I could mock Tyler with more credibility," she writes, "if I had not remembered, as I did just now, that to this day I have never been immunized." When Tara wins the prestigious Gates scholarship, interview requests from BYU and local news are pouring in. When she fails to mention homeschooling in her interviews, her father is annoyed. Her parents refuse to come to her graduation. Tara calls, apologizes, and begs them to come. They miss most of the ceremony, and Tara's recollection of them on her graduation day are strained and awkward. When her parents take her to the airport, Gene is a defeated man. He told Tara that he has thousands of gallons of fuel buried and can come get her when the end comes, but once she crosses the ocean, she will be beyond his reach. During the first lecture Tara attends at Cambridge, the lecturer discusses Isaac Berlin's concept of liberty. Tara has never heard of Isaac Berlin. Afraid to ask questions, afraid to make it obvious that she doesn't belong, she takes notes on everything. When Drew, a friend from BYU, sends her Bob Marley's song, Redemption, the words resonate with her. She scribbles the lyrics into notebooks throughout the day. "Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds." When she listens to two of her classmates discussing feminism, it's the first time she hears the term in a positive light. Reading Mary Wollstonecraft and John Stuart Mill helps her understand the unrest she's felt since childhood. She never wanted to be a silent, submissive follower, which she was taught was her role as a woman. Tara always felt that she was somehow perverse for those feelings. But now, a line from John Stuart Mill on women captures her attention. "It is a subject on which nothing final can be known." Tara finds comfort in the absence of expectations and limitations. For the first time in her life, she feels that it is enough to simply be a woman. When Tara is at Buck's Peak for Christmas, she finds that her mother's business is growing rapidly. Her brother Richard is home for Christmas with his wife Cammie and their baby son. Cammie is a mainstream Mormon, an outsider, and Tara watches Richard try to walk the line between his wife and his parents, pretending to agree with his father's opinions and then laughing them off to his wife. When Jean sees Tara mixing oils for her mother in the kitchen, he mocks her. "Who knew we'd have to send you to Cambridge to get you in the kitchen where you belong?" A week after Tara arrives at the farm, an intense cold spell sets in and the temperature drops below zero. The family is gathered in the house one night when the back door is flung open and Emily runs in. She's barefoot, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, shaking and sobbing. Sean has locked her out of the house for buying the wrong crackers for their son. Tara waits for Sean to show up to check on his wife, but he never comes. Eventually, Jean calls him. When Sean arrives, Jean lectures his son and then sends him back home with his wife and baby. Tara spends the day before her return to England with her sister Audrey. Audrey, unable to get even a GED, is homeschooling her 4 children. At the end of the day, the children begin to fight over a toy, and Tara takes it away. She tells them that if they act like children, she will treat them like children. Audrey tells her that Sean used to say the same thing. Tara is shocked by her words. Back in London, she confesses in her journal that it had never occurred to her that her sister might have experienced the same things she did. In April, Tara writes an essay on John Stuart Mill's ideas of self-sovereignty, and it earns high praise from her professor. During the spring holiday, she goes to Rome with a group of her fellow students. She feeds off the pulsing life and energy of the beautiful city. When she returns to Cambridge, she receives an email from her sister Audrey. In it, Audrey apologizes for not stopping Sean from abusing Tara. But when Audrey told their mother of Sean's abuse, Faye did not believe her. Consequently, Audrey went into denial. But now Audrey wants to confront Sean, and she wants Tara to back her up. Initially, Tara resents her sister for dragging her back into something she had just begun to forget. But she knows she can't abandon her sister and agrees to support her. Audrey shows her mother the email, and that evening Faye writes Tara that it's painful to realize she refused to see the abuse. Tara is overwhelmed that their mother believes her and Audrey. In a shockingly honest exchange, Faye admits that she knew about the bullying, perhaps only subconsciously, but she chose to look the other way. She promises to talk to Jean and get Sean the help he needs. Faye apologizes for failing her daughter. At that moment, the bitterness drains from Tara. Her parents have changed, she realizes. Her memories of the past drift and fade away, and suddenly her father becomes not deranged, but eccentric. The past is a ghost, and it no longer matters. Only the future matters, because the future will be different. Tara has just learned that she's won a place at Cambridge to study for a PhD when her mother writes to tell her that Grandma down the hill is dying. Tara travels to Idaho to see her grandmother, and then she goes to Buck's Peak. The house is loud and busy, with women everywhere, mixing oils, filling bottles, and packing boxes for shipment. Drew, by this time more than a friend, has come with her, and he's amazed by the chaos. To get away from the bewildering noise of the house, Tara takes Drew to the mountain, and they stay there until Drew leaves for Salt Lake City. When Tara re-enters her house, it's strangely silent. The house is empty, and the phones are disconnected. Tara learns that her grandmother has passed away. After the death of his mother, Jean loses interest in the business. He only leaves his bed to shout at Sean for the perceived mismanagement of the junkyard or to criticize his wife for how she handles her employees. After the funeral, Faye snaps and yells at her husband for refusing to help out. It is the first time that Tara witnesses her mother standing up to her father. Going to check on her mother the next morning, Tara finds her sobbing in the bathroom, trying to muffle the sound with a blow-dryer. Faye pulls her daughter into a hug. It's a rare display of vulnerability from a woman who has always been quietly strong, and Tara treasures the moment. Tara and Drew have become very close, and she tells him things she's never admitted to anyone else. She tells him the ugly truth about her family, but tells it as a thing of the past. Her family has changed, but she thinks Drew should know so that he can watch Tara in case she does something crazy. To qualify for a PhD, Tara must write a piece of original academic research. A professor suggests that she write it on Mormonism, studying the movement from an intellectual rather than a religious standpoint. She studies the letters of Joe Smith and Brigham Young, and the very act of reading them with discernment rather than the reverence she had been taught as a child feels like forbidden fruit. The next time she sees Sean, Tara feels that her brother has finally changed. He's older, wiser, more controlled, and he seems to finally be at peace with himself. Their conversations feel like those of the early years of the relationship, before the injuries and the abuse. They talk about Sean's work and his son. But one day, Sean asks if Tara talks to Audrey. When Tara says no, Sean relaxes and accuses Audrey of being a lying piece of shit. He says he would shoot her, but it would be a waste of a good bullet. That night, Tara tells her father what Sean had said. She thinks her dad will handle the situation, but instead, Jean demands proof, physical evidence that Sean is violent or manipulative. Tara looks to her mother for support, but Faye is silent. For months, Tara has convinced herself that her parents believe her, but now she's hit with the realization that it was all a fantasy. Jean calls Sean and tells him about his sister's accusations. Sean comes over, sits down next to Tara, and drops a bloody knife into her palm. "If you're smart," he tells her, "you'll use this on yourself, because it will be better than what I'll do to you if you don't." Faye calmly tells Sean his words are uncalled for, and Jean launches into one of his endless lectures. When he's finally done, Sean apologizes to Tara, and she hugs him, but it feels hollow and empty. Tara realizes that her mother has never confronted her father or her brother. Her mother's apology was a lie. Back in Cambridge, Tara waits apprehensively for Sean to retaliate. In March, he calls to tell her about his son, Peter, but at the end of the call, he casually says that he can't decide whether he should kill Tara himself or hire an assassin. The cost of a flight to England might make it cheaper to hire a killer, he says. After listening to Sean's threats and verbal abuse for a while, Tara finally hangs up on him. She calls her parents to tell them about Sean's threats, but they excuse and dismiss them. After numerous abusive phone calls, Sean finally breaks off all contact with her, telling her to stay away from him and his family. Tara is incredibly hurt. Her parents think her brother was right to cut Tara off. Faye says that Tara's anger is twice as dangerous as Sean could ever be. What follows is best described in Tara's own words. "Reality became fluid. The next time we spoke, Mother told me that the knife had never been meant as a threat. Sean was trying to make you more comfortable," she said. "He knew you'd be scared if he was holding a knife, so he gave it to you." A week later, she said there had never been any knife at all. "Talking to you," she said, "your reality is so warped. It's like talking to someone who wasn't even there." I agreed. It was exactly like that. Studying with Drew in Paris that summer, Tara gets another email from Audrey. She accuses Tara of provoking her to speak against Sean when she had already forgiven him. She feels that her sister is dangerous and tells Tara that she is not welcome in her home anymore. Tara has lost her family, and she cannot comprehend it. It's so far beyond the realm of her possibility that she believes the only answer is that she might be completely insane. She begins to doubt her own ability to understand and remember the simplest things. Desperately searching for clues to her sanity, she contacts Erin, one of Sean's old girlfriends. Tara asks her point blank if she only imagined the abuse. Erin writes back immediately and tells Tara her own stories of Sean's abuse. Tara feels a little better. Tara wins a visiting fellowship to Harvard, and there she enrolls in every course she can fit into her schedule. She begins to read 18th century philosophers and early advocates of women's rights: Hume, Rousseau, Wollstonecraft, Mill. She becomes obsessed with their writing and ideas about how people should balance their obligations to family with their obligations to society. She begins to write the first chapter of her PhD, drawing from principles she found in Hume's Principles of Morals and Mill's The Subjection of Women. Tara's parents come to Harvard to visit her, to testify, and to bring her to the Lord. All Tara wants is to have her family back, and she's willing to do whatever it takes. Doubting her own sanity, she's certain of nothing. When life itself seems lunatic, who knows where madness lies? But when her father offers her a priesthood blessing, in which he lays his hands on her and casts out the evil that caused her to lie about her brother and family, Tara refuses. She wants her family's love, but she cannot accept their warped reality. Her parents quickly leave. Tara stops studying and comes close to failing her PhD. She has vivid nightmares and finally decides that refusing her father's blessing was a mistake. When she tells Drew that she will go back to Buck's Peak, he begs her not to go, but Tara doesn't listen. When Tara arrives home, her mother is overjoyed. She babbles nervously, then retreats to the kitchen to prepare food for her daughter. Tara promises to come help, but first she has to email Drew. She promised him to write every 2 hours so that he knows she is safe. When she turns on the computer, she reads a message her mother has sent to Sean's old girlfriend, Erin. Faye writes that her family has been saved, but that Tara has given herself over to fear and is thus a danger to the family. Erin agrees with Faye and offers to pray for Tara. Tara finally understands that there is nothing left for her at her parents' house. She takes her journals from under her bed, hugs her parents, and leaves Buck's Peak for the last time. At Cambridge, Tara continues to unravel. She's still sleepwalking, and her skin breaks out so drastically that strangers stop to ask if she's having an allergic reaction. She has panic attacks. Abandoned and desperate, she writes an angry, accusatory letter to her father, telling him she's cutting off contact. She needs a year to heal, she tells him, and then maybe she can try to begin to make sense of their twisted world. Her mother begs her daughter to find another way, and her father is silent. Still unable to study, Tara is close to quitting school. Her brother Tyler confronts his father about his treatment of Tara, and it goes very wrong. Jean threatens to disown Tyler if he brings up the topic again. Sean threatens his brother. When Tara gets an email from Tyler and his wife Stephanie, she almost cannot open it. She is convinced that her brother won't choose her over the family. When she does open the email, she reads without comprehending. Our parents are held down by chains of abuse, manipulation, and control. They see change as dangerous and will exile anyone who asks for it. This is a perverted idea of family loyalty. They claim faith, but this is not what the gospel teaches. Keep safe. We love you. After receiving her brother's letter, Tara enrolls in the university counseling service and eventually returns to the first chapter she wrote for her PhD. Once again, she reads Hume, Rousseau, Smith, Godwin, Wollstonecraft, and Mill. She works on her thesis, The Family, Morality, and Social Science in Anglo-American Cooperative Thought, 1913 to 1890. Her favorite portion is a chapter on Mormonism. She approaches it from an arbitrary standpoint, neither Mormon nor anti-Mormon, neither spiritual or profane. When her supervisor reads the draft, he tells her he'd be surprised if it doesn't earn her doctorate. Almost 10 years to the day after she took her first class at BYU, Tara Westover receives her doctorate. Happy with the new life she's built, she still has unfinished work. When she left Idaho the last time, she ran away and allowed someone else to be her voice, to define who she was to everyone she'd ever known. She's conceited enough, and it's time to take a stand. It's time for her to go home. Back in Idaho, Tara visits her grandfather and plans to visit Tyler and Stephanie, who live 100 miles north of Buck's Peak, next. Before she goes, though, she wants to see her mother and writes to ask if they can meet in town. A short time later, Faye responds. She will not go where her husband is not welcome. Tara doesn't meet with her. The family meets again when Faye's mother dies. Tyler, Richard, and Tony greet Tara warmly, and she has awkward, stilted conversations with Audrey and Luke. Sean does not look at her once. Her family is divided, and the rift Tara feels is only widening. For 2 years, Tara obsessively enumerates her father's cruelties and shortcomings, updating the tally to reflect every new grievance she remembers and trying to calculate and weigh his guilt against his innocence. She thinks that this process will justify her decision to break off the contact with her parents. But it's not until she accepts her own decision, on her own terms, that she finally feels peace. It's the only way she can choose to love her father. Finally, her transformation is complete. You may call it disillusionment, distortion, metamorphosis, or awakening. Tara Westover calls it her education.